Okay, well, before I start talking about plants, I just want to show you two leaflets um, which give all sorts of ideas about gardening for bats. This one is produced by the Wildlife Trusts and the Royal Horticultural Society, and it's part of a series they've done called Wild About Gardens. And all the leaflets in this series have hints about how to help all sorts of wildlife. And I'll come back to this series later, but this one, Stars of the Night, is all about bats. And this one is produced by the Bat Conservation Trust. And again, it has lots of ideas. Now, you'll have found on your chair an information sheet. And on there are the website addresses where you can get hold of these two leaflets. And also on the sheet is a list of all the plants I'm going to mention tonight, so you don't have to take notes or anything like that. Now, we've established that all our UK bats eat insects and only insects. So helping our insects, giving them a cushy life and welcoming them into our gardens is the single most important thing we can do to support bats. So we help bats at one remove by supporting the insects that they eat. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And when we think of helping insects, we immediately think of planting for them, and generally in terms of providing nectar and pollen for pollinators, like this rather random cosmos flower here. Oh, and the other very important thing to help insects is to use no chemicals, no insecticides, of course, but also no herbicides and no fungicides. The good news is that all of the plants you probably already have for pollinators will be very useful. Diversity in planting is always important. Basically, it means that there'll be something for everyone in the insect world, and hopefully plenty for everyone. And diversity is diversity of flower shape, both open flowers and tubular flowers, and diversity in flowering time. And this is really important. Any creatures which hibernate, as bats do, need special support at the extremes of the season. In spring, when they emerge from hibernation, they'll have used up all their internal stores, and they'll need to eat to restore their energy levels. Then, in late summer and autumn, as they prepare for hibernation, they need to eat many insects in order to create those fat stores which will sustain them through their hibernation. So first of all, I'm going to talk about early and late flowers, but I want to thank Helen for making this graphic for me. So I'll start with spring, and most of us are probably quite familiar with spring flowers particularly because we're also longing for them to appear after the winter. They're perhaps the ones that mean the most to us, and they're certainly what get our insect populations going. I'll just highlight a few. My favourite spring flower is Pulmonaria, that one on the top left. And then primroses, of course, and hellebores that come very early in the year as well. And then these three weeds, red dead nettle, there's such a lot of that about at the moment, and I've really noticed how many insects are visiting it. White dead nettle and green alkanet, that's the one with the blue flowers. It's a bit of a thug in the garden, but I do think we should all have a patch of it because it's a great favourite with so many different insects. And then spring shrubs, of course, like flowering currant and berberis that are out just now. Very important. And all our flowering fruit trees and flowering ornamental trees as well. They're all early flowering. So that's just a few ideas for this time of year. And now I'll jump to late summer flowers, which attract insects just as bats need them before they hibernate. And these include salvias, There are two different kinds here. The Caradonna type on the left, and then this on rather more flimsy looking on the right. They're called Greggii or Microphylla, I think, these ones. And then Persicaria. I think Persicarias are the unsung heroes of the insect-friendly garden. Japanese anemones, what we used to call sedums, but we now have to call Hylotelephiums, and Michaelmas daisies, very familiar there. And a few more ideas: single and anemone flowered dahlias, heleniums, and echinaceas. And an important late shrub, Abelia grandiflora, goes on flowering well into the late summer. So I've dealt with a few ideas for early and late in the year, but of course the thing with bats is that they fly at night. So attracting night flying insects who are looking for nectar is particularly important. As a general principle, pale coloured flowers, which can still be seen at dusk as dusk turns to dark, are the ones to favour. And of course, because it's dark, scent plays a vital role in letting the insects know that they're there. The classic night-scented plants are these: honeysuckle, night-scented stock, evening primrose, sweet rocket, and tobacco plant. But apart from the honeysuckle, these are all annual or biennial plants, so you do have to replace them every year. But here are three night-scented perennials, all related to each other and rather similar. White campion is probably quite familiar. But what about night-flowering catchfly? And this exquisite thing, which is Nottingham catchfly. I haven't grown it before, but I've got a plant of this to try this year. When we think of night-flying insects, we generally think of moths, and moths are important, especially for the larger of the bats we get around here, the brown long-eared and the nocturnal bats. So those night-scented plants I just mentioned are very good for the adult moths. But the thing with moths, and butterflies for that matter, is that they have free-living larvae, caterpillars. And these larvae also need plants to feed on. And native plants, our wildflowers, are best here, since the insects have co-evolved with the plants they have found here. Some moth caterpillars are very specific in their requirements, but there are quite a few plants which serve quite a few different species of moths. And here's a picture of some of the best. And this is the one I've reproduced on the back of the information sheet for you, because there's rather a lot on this page. And I'll just pick out a few, because the ones I'm going to pick out are the ones that we've got some baby plants of here, which you can buy if you like for £1.50 each, and you can start your own moth-friendly, bat-friendly little patch in your garden, or perhaps at the end of an allotment bed or something like that. So the ones we've got are red and white campion, oxeye daisy, common sorrel, common knapweed, foxglove, and lady's bedstraw. And we've also got a few plants of pulmonaria, my favourite spring flower too. And note that shrubs and trees, some of which are in the top row here, are also important for moth larvae, as well as the smaller plants. And one shrub I haven't got on this sheet is my favourite native shrub, which is Guelder rose. I just love the translucent berries of it. And something like a silver birch tree, is very important too. The silver birch is the third most important native tree for insects. It comes after oak, and I think willow is the other one. But silver birch is better for our gardens, perhaps, than an enormous oak tree. And as it happens, the RHS and Wildlife Trusts have just announced that this year's Wild About Gardens focus is on moths. And they've published this leaflet about how to encourage moths and also ways to see them yourself. So it's in the same series as the Stars of the Night one I mentioned right at the beginning and available from the same website. So far, the things I'm suggesting are going to bring considerable pleasure to you, as well as helping bats. You're going to have a lovely flower garden, lots of colour and lots of scent as you sit out in the evening. I'm assuming you're all going to follow this advice. But while our larger bats, like the brown long-eared, can tussle with a moth, our smaller bats, like the pipistrelles, need smaller insects. And it's said that a pipistrelle can eat 3,000 midges in a single night. Midges and gnats. So, if we want abundant bats, my goodness, we need a lot of midges and gnats. And luckily they do usually come in large numbers, clouds and crowds of them dancing in the air. So, how to help gnats first? I'm afraid it's no good being squeamish about this. Mainly with gnats, both adults and larvae eat soft, rotting fruit and veg, and they lay their eggs in them as well. And any decaying plants, anything that's a bit whiffy, a bit slimy, that's what they like. Some eat fungi, but it's a win-win really. Gnats help to clear up the mess in the garden and then become food for the bats you want to attract. But not if you tidy up the mess first. Leave things alone and nature will sort it out. Now, midges lay their eggs in water and their larvae are fully aquatic. You may have left a bucket of water around somewhere and wondered how the squiggly creatures got into it. Well, they may be midge larvae, and the adults, when they emerge, will be very welcome to bats. Unfortunately, you may also get mosquito larvae in your bucket. Great favourites among bats, but among humans, not so much. While UK mosquitoes are an irritant, quite literally, rather than a danger, there is a concern that with climate change, we could start to get disease-carrying mosquitoes here. So, all the more reason to increase our bat populations as much as possible to control them. And of course, a small pond with shallow edges and no fish is a pleasant and decorative aquatic environment for such creatures, rather than a bucket. But the other pond dwellers might eat them before they grow up to become food for bats. And anyway, I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to go down the route of encouraging midges. Then there are crane flies. Oh, I used to be so scared of them as a child. We went on camping holidays and they'd get in the tent and I was petrified of their legs draping over my face. But the point is, there were a lot of them, and now there aren't so many. It's sad that when you do a Google search about crane flies, nearly half the entries on the front page are about how to kill them. And unlike mosquitoes, they are completely harmless to us and beneficial to bats. I had no right to dislike them, and we have no right to kill them. No chemicals if you want to encourage bats. Crane flies are quite a varied lot. Some of them have lovely patterns on their wings, like this one. And the one we're most familiar with, the classic daddy longlegs, is the one whose larvae are known as leather jackets. Now, what's not to love about that? Now, they live in soil and very often in lawns, and they eat the roots of the grass, and that's why people want to kill them. And it does result in bare patches in lawns, but we need to regard this as another win-win, because bare patches in lawns provide a space for solitary mining bees to make their nests. And we certainly want solitary bees. Look how pretty they are. Lovely creatures. But I digress. This is not a talk about bees. By the way, some types of cranefly larvae don't live in soil but are semi-aquatic, a bit like the midges. This is the UK's largest cranefly. It's called Tipula maxima, and its larvae feed on decaying vegetation in shallow water. So how about leaving a tray of water with dead leaves in? It could help them. And then you might get the lovely adults in your house, as I did here. Some bats eat beetles, even including the huge night-flying maybugs. There are so many different beetles in the UK, well over 4,000 species, and with so many different lifestyles, it's difficult to be specific about what to do to help them. But in my garden, I mostly see beetles on the flat heads of umbellifer flowers, such as wild carrot or cow parsley, pictured here, or hogweed. Not giant hogweed, you definitely don't want that, but our native common hogweed is very good. And also tiny beetles on dandelion flowers. Dandelion, another wonderful plant we should all welcome into our gardens. And as it happens, it's the emblem of Cheltenham Action for Nature. And that's why I'm dressed like dandelion. Beetles also love dead wood. So do make a log pile or a dead hedge or a bug snug. A bug snug is a kind of conical dead hedge. And I'm indebted to my friend Sarah Payne, who isn't here tonight, for letting me photograph her dead hedge and her bug snug on her allotment. And a lot of invertebrates, including beetles, love leaf litter. So do leave leaves. It's like a lovely salad for invertebrates. Rake them off your lawn onto any flower beds. And yet another win-win. Because you'll also be helping earthworms, which will take the leaves down into your soil and keep that in good health too. We tend to think that all bats feed by catching insects on the wing, but quite surprisingly, some bats will come down to the ground to find food. I said at the beginning that bats eat only insects, but actually they also like all those sorts of things you find in compost heaps, which aren't all insects, woodlice and centipedes and spiders and the like, and earwigs, which are insects. So another win-win. You have a compost heap to keep your soil in good condition, but you'll be helping bats as well. And do leave trees alone if you possibly can. The writing on this poster is a bit blurry, but what it says is that one of the most important things that trees provide for bats is roosting spaces behind loose bark, in woodpecker or rot holes, behind ivy or within hollow trunks. And bats will perch in trees to eat awkward prey, like those maybugs perhaps. And if your tree is part...
There's something going on with the electricity. When I drove here, the traffic lights had all gone off and the brewery was flickering and there's something strange going on.
Well, I'll carry on regardless. So we're talking about trees, and that bats do perch in trees, and also if your tree is part of a row of trees, it will help bats to navigate. And brown long-eared bats often fly quite slowly past trees, and apparently they can hear a ladybird walking on a leaf. So if you've got old trees in particular, as long as they're safe, do leave them if you possibly can. I despair at how often I hear trees being cut down. By the way, do look out for the Chelsea Flower Show this May, because the Bat Conservation Trust has a garden there this year, designed by Melanie Hick. So it seems that helping bats in our gardens is an idea whose time has come. It'll take me a long time. I've only got 2 more pictures, so I think I'll just leave it. Go. In fact, I've only got 1 more. So I've talked about some win-wins, and the ultimate win-win-win-win-win is that if you nurture the insects in your gardens, you won't only be helping bats, you'll be helping many of our songbirds. You'll be helping frogs and toads and newts and slowworms and lizards, and you'll be helping hedgehogs. All those desirable things that we want in our wildlife gardens have one thing in common: they all depend upon insects. So whatever kind of wildlife gardening you do, whether just with bats in mind or wildlife more generally, we would love to know where you are. And that's why we've put a garden nature checklist on your chair. If you'd like to, and only if you'd like to, do fill it up and leave it with us, or go to the Cheltenham Action for Nature website and you can fill it up there. This is the first step in our project we're calling Cheltenham Gardens for Nature. And eventually we'd like to build a map of wildlife gardens throughout our town, so we can see how they contribute to wildlife corridors between our other green spaces. But just as important, we'd also love for you to feel that your efforts are part of something bigger. And over time, we want Cheltenham Gardens for Nature to include other ways to get involved, so conversations, discussions, talks, and so on, so that we're connecting people across streets and communities, as well as connecting our gardens for wildlife. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry the last two pictures didn't work.